Okay, our second presenter is Camilla Warren.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about economic development. If you happen to have a brownfield site is typically a site that is abandoned. It's certainly not reaching its potential for development and future use. And EPA does have grants and technical assistance for these types of sites. We do work in concert with Economic Development Administration as well as USDA in preparing sites for redevelopment. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. So we've talked about the purpose of the webinar in our preparation meetings. So we're trying to help communities organize and align partnerships in order to develop redevelopment strategies. So I'm going to talk about redeveloping a brown site from that standpoint, not so much the site, but how the strategy and partnership helps bring resources and ideas to site redevelopment. The GMA has already presented some case studies where this has happened, so I encourage you to look for those on their website. They did interview and visit Sandersville and Vienna, so those were our rural examples for Georgia. So we have some case studies, and I'm going to get right into talking about how to develop partnerships, how to create strategies with those partners, and giving you information on EPA tools and resources and how to leverage federal funding. All right, so as we get into next steps for revitalization, let's look at this from the standpoint that you have a site, and now you're going to get going on your redevelopment strategy. So there's some steps you want to take. You want to identify some existing partners. Do not do this alone. You'll need all types of partners to help with deciding how to revitalize sites, how to identify resources, and how to implement redevelopment and new business in your community. You do want to identify a catalyst site, typically at EPA. Catalyst sites are maybe gateway sites, like an auto dealership or a gas station near an exit of an interstate or major highway. It may also be the gateway site, the site as you come into your community. We work on a lot of corridor sites, which is in some ways similar to the regional perspective that Jonathan discussed. Corridors around streams, waterways, as well as stretches of, say, the old US highways that have been replaced by interstates. We like to work in those areas. Also be sure to get a check on the needs of the community, because if you're looking for federal funding, usually you're going to have some information and some buy-in from the community. Jonathan already mentioned having buy-in from local government, but in EPA, because we typically work in compromised sites, the community input is very important, and those needs have to be addressed in some way. Also, you want your team to help you identify funding and resources that are available, which could be everything from in-kind to technical assistance in addition to funding. So let's just talk about that group of partners in your team. You need to have between 3 and 5. I've actually worked in projects where key partners didn't get reelected or moved on to a new job, and the other 2 or 3 partners were very critical to keeping the project going. So don't miss out on that by trying to do it with a small group of partners. And I'm just going to list a number of good partners. Jonathan mentioned regional commission, local government. Some local governments have staff, but if you don't, you can usually check into the regional commission in Georgia, or even call some of the federal agencies or county extension offices to get more information on USDA or other partners. So here's just a list of those partners. Don't forget your colleges and universities. As was just presented, Georgia Southern created that innovation lab for Statesboro, Georgia. Now, once you get your team together, you want to go right into developing your strategy and your plan. I mentioned here that there's an assessment phase of sites need environmental assessments. Sometimes they don't. But regardless, go ahead and start checking in with the community and getting a handle on their needs, as well as developing partnerships. So here's some things to think about in working with the community. Is there already a redevelopment plan? See, John mentioned the SEDS plan, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And from what I understand, everybody's got one. You need to check with your county planning office or your elected officials or your regional commission to find out really what's the plan for your area. If you're in a larger community, master plans and neighborhood framework plans are important. You want to continue to gauge the community through meetings and charrettes. Get their ideas on what their needs are and how that might be worked into redevelopment and revitalization. You don't want to start a business if nobody wants to buy your product. In many communities, there's a need for service jobs. We're always looking for industry, retail. Sometimes housing is an issue. Communities are investing in green space all the time, green space and trails, as well as walking and biking trails. Now, once you've assessed your community and developed an initial strategy plan, there's a lot of different ways to move toward actually doing a redevelopment, and we're going to talk about that. Let's just go over the steps real quick. At this point, we're looking at a site that's been assessed, cleanup not necessarily warranted. If you do need a cleanup, you can talk with EPA and the state Georgia Environmental Protection Division about those needs. Oh, we're stuck on a slide. Let's see if we can. Okay. All right. Usually you're going to have to work with a private developer, or in the case of public development, there could be private and public funding with your local bank or your regional banks. As I said, if you have a site that might need a cleanup, you want to talk with your EPA or state offices on brownfields redevelopment. EPA does have brownfields cleanup grants. There is other funding that may be available for that, assessment and technical assistance. You want to be marketing the property to private developers once the assessment and cleanup is completed. Some communities have revolving loan funds, and there are regional and state planning financing authorities that you might want to ask about. More about partners. In a typical site situation, I've created this diagram just to make it simple. Some of your initial partners. Our bubble on the right, that is foundations and community groups. On the left, that's developer. Somehow our slide shrunk there. But always talk with your city and county offices as well as your regional commission. Now, let's talk about sectors of redevelopment. There's all kinds of things out there that communities need. We just mentioned Jonathan just mentioned healthcare and infrastructure. There's a difference usually between rural and urban development, and then there's industrial and commercial. So if you look around the circle here, going counterclockwise, I believe, in an urban area, you're going to need housing, trails, green space, as well as some of the others. Now, industrial and commercial, you'll be looking for opportunities to develop either heavy or light commercial and industrial, as well as retail and service. So these are all options for a redevelopment strategy. You might want to have more than one strategy or just stick with one. Going over clockwise, in infrastructure, you may have highway expansion going on. That's a good opportunity to redevelop a gas station where the highway's widening, particularly at gateways and at exits. A lot of people get their introduction to brownfields cleanup that way. And a lot of folks are putting in electric and sewer upgrades as well as internet and cable. All these activities need sites to get going. And then in rural, there's a lot of agricultural activity going on related to product development, Retail service is always needed in rural areas, and in many cases, housing. A number of different federal agencies provide these types of support, technical assistance, and resources. Public health in the middle. We got one more coming up here. There we go. And as Jonathan just presented, sometimes folks get together and work on the hospital situation, but as he also mentions, many times you've got to work on infrastructure to get to that point. I'm going to go on through these slides. Let's see. Now, as we wrap up, I'm going to talk about opportunities to leverage funding by connecting with federal agencies. You usually want to do this through your regional commission or through state agencies, and also groups such as Georgia Municipal Association. If you look along the right, you'll see a list of federal agencies. I'm going to show how these agencies support different types of redevelopment. For instance, DOT, Federal Highway, as well as local activity can fund infrastructure and industrial commercial. Department of Labor sometimes can assist with job development, job training, as well as EDA and EPA if you're looking at a contaminated sites. In some cases, as well as local arts groups and schools, National Endowment for the Arts provides funding for special projects. In public health, there are numerous agencies at the state and federal level. Many times, federal agencies are going to fund through the states, but those agencies are Health and Human Services, Health Resources Services Administration, as well as colleges and universities. And there's some others there for rural and urban agencies you want to check into. EPA has guidance documents and workbooks to help you get started. The very beginning is the prepared workbook. This is a workbook of actual forms and activities to help you start your first public meeting, develop your first agenda for your partner meeting, and then provide some ideas on how to talk with regulators and other state agencies about asking for resources and technical assistance. It's a very good workbook. Now, if you're interested in creating information about leveraging resources you already have for revitalization for brownfields and other community sites, this is a book that can provide guidance on that. Many times federal and other agencies are looking for how you're going to leverage a project and make sure it fits with an overall strategy. That's what this book is for. And here's the one I just mentioned. Many times people get started in a brownfields redevelopment activity because they have the famous old gas station in town or near the interstate exit, and they don't know what to do with it. There's a lot of this going on. States actually have trust funds to take care of some of these old sites, but you do want to get your regulatory group involved. That would be Georgia Environmental Protection Division or EPA. This is the perfect site for a $200,000 grant because that would usually take care of the cost associated with pulling the tank and cleaning up the site. Other technical resources EPA has. This is where you just write or call us and we can bring somebody to your community. Groundmark USA, they offer assistance from various brownfield affected communities, particularly where those are disinvested communities or equitable development is needed. A number of groups are eligible. Only a letter of interest is needed, and the regional folks will follow up and work with you on that. And here's some websites and names that you can call on. Then, myself and other folks at EPA will do a follow-up discussion with you to figure out what's your next step and how you want to proceed in developing either a partner group or strategy. And we can advise you on what grants and agencies you need to be working with. We can cover a lot of topics. We can talk about environmental situations, any zoning challenges, incentives for developers, future uses that are eligible for your site, and other types of funding that may have already been in your community that you need to leverage. And here's our contact information. We'll leave this with GMA so you can refer to it when you get started on redeveloping your brownfield site. Thank you.